Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a true mystery that literally feels like it was pulled straight out of a Hollywood thriller. But every single detail we're about to cover actually happened. Picture this. It's February 1959. Deep in the frozen, totally unforgiving Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, an expedition of 9 experienced hikers sets out into the wilderness. These guys were young, strong, and highly trained for extreme environments. But, as you'll see, something went horribly wrong.
Think about it. Experienced hikers simply do not abandon their survival gear in a blizzard. I mean, unless they absolutely have to. When rescuers finally tracked down this group weeks later, the scene they discovered completely defied logic. There were footprints leading out into the deep snow, bare feet, mysterious, utterly devastating injuries. These hardcore survival experts had actually run out into the freezing darkness, essentially naked. Now, more than 60 years later, this remains one of history's absolute most chilling unsolved cases.
Section 1. The Expedition. Before the Darkness.
So before the darkness fell, things were, well, entirely normal. The group was led by this ambitious 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov. And again, these are highly experienced hikers and skiers. In late January, they set off for Ural Mountains. The journey was really well documented, and the mood was overwhelmingly positive. They were writing in journals, laughing, posing for those classic black and white photographs in the snow. Nothing at all seemed out of place. But then, on February 1st, they pitched their camp on a barren mountain slope. And from that moment on, everything changed.
Try to put yourself in their shoes for just a second. As the evening of February 1st sets in, the temperature drops far below freezing. We're talking unforgiving, howling winds sweeping right across that barren mountain slope. Retreating from those punishing elements, the 9 hikers zip themselves into their shared tent for the night, fully expecting to just, ride out the storm.
Section 2. The Final Night. A Frantic Escape.
What actually happened inside that tent remains a profound mystery. But we do know that right in the middle of that freezing night, the group suddenly and completely abandoned their shelter. Which brings us to the absolute most haunting question of this explainer. Why did they flee into the freezing darkness? Whatever frightened them must have been so utterly terrifying and so immediately urgent that they literally left behind their heavy coats, their boots, and all their critical supplies. They made the choice to run directly into a lethal winter storm.
Now, what's really interesting about this physical evidence is what it tells us about their sheer panic. When search teams arrived, they found all the group's personal belongings, their food, their equipment, all neatly packed inside the partially collapsed tent. But here's the kicker. The hikers hadn't unzipped the entrance to escape. Instead, the thick fabric of the tent had been violently slashed open. And investigators actually proved it was cut from the inside out. They literally slashed their way out in a blind panic.
Section 3. Bizarre Clues and Injuries. The Investigation.
The official investigation following this grim discovery, it only deepened the mystery. Following those bare footprints away from the campsite, rescuers eventually found the first bodies beneath a large cedar tree. And the evidence left in the snow paints an incredibly chaotic picture. The victims were dressed only in their light underclothing. There was clear evidence they desperately tried to get a fire going. But honestly, perhaps the strangest detail of all, broken branches high up in that cedar tree. Someone had frantically climbed up into the branches. But what on earth were they looking for? Or more chillingly, what were they hiding from?
And this brilliantly illustrates just how baffling this case truly is. Obviously, when people run out into the freezing cold without coats, the expected reality is death by hypothermia. And yeah, while some victims did sadly freeze to death, others presented an unexplainable reality. Investigators found severe, unexplainable trauma. We're talking a fractured skull, crushed ribs, and horrifyingly, one victim was actually missing a tongue. Medical examiners later compared these massive internal injuries to the extreme trauma of a high-speed car accident. Yet, and this is wild, there were absolutely no signs of a struggle or any trace of anyone else on that mountain.
The investigators were just completely stumped. Unable to make any sense of the bizarre scene or these devastating injuries, they actually just shut it down. The official Soviet investigation suddenly closed the case with this vague, incredibly eerie conclusion. They officially stated that the hikers had died because of, quote, an unknown compelling force. As you can probably guess, that non-answer satisfied absolutely no one.
Section 4. Competing Theories. The Search for Answers.
Look, when a government abruptly closes a bizarre case with a phrase like an unknown compelling force, human nature takes over, right? The search for answers just exploded into a global obsession. For decades, speculation ran absolutely wild. Theories ranged from natural disasters like avalanches to dark human interventions, escaped prisoners, things like that.
A lot of people strongly believe the Soviet government was hiding classified weapons testing. Some witnesses even reported seeing strange glowing lights in the sky, which obviously fueled theories of extraterrestrial involvement. The theories were endless, but absolute certainty, that remained completely out of reach.
But recently, there's been a pretty major breakthrough. Modern science finally stepped in. Armed with new technology and advanced computer modeling, a team of researchers decided to revisit the old evidence to see if cold, hard logic could finally pierce through decades of myth. And they proposed something called the delayed avalanche hypothesis.
Let's move to this and see how it builds into a very logical sequence of events. First, researchers now believe that unusual, highly localized snow conditions, combined with the hikers actually cutting into the slope to pitch their tent, created a rare delayed avalanche event. So suddenly, a small but incredibly heavy slab of snow crashes onto the tent in the pitch black. Fearing the entire mountain is collapsing around them, the hikers frantically slash the tent open to escape being buried alive. Once they're outside in that blinding storm, they quickly become separated and totally disoriented. Ultimately, they perish in the extreme weather. And that massive, heavy snow slab? Well, that would perfectly explain the crushed ribs and the severe car crash-like trauma.
The really crucial point here is the stark comparison. On one hand, we've got the 1950s Soviet investigation chalking the whole thing up to this terrifying, mystical, unknown, compelling force. On the other, modern scientific research gives us a grounded physical explanation, a delayed avalanche event. And honestly, the modern theory is brilliant. It neatly explains so many of those physical details that originally baffled investigators. But even the scientists themselves admit it doesn't explain absolutely everything. Frustrating questions still linger.
Section 5. The Enduring Enigma, 60 years later.
Today, more than 60 years after that fateful February night, the Dyatlov Pass mystery continues to absolutely fascinate and horrify the world. Because at the end of the day, the tragedy all comes down to that number: 9. 9 young, vibrant, highly experienced hikers entered the Ural Mountains completely full of life, and 0 returned. Their final, desperate hours remain ultimately hidden beneath layers of deep snow, the long passage of time, and just profound uncertainty.
Perhaps one day a piece of undiscovered evidence will finally emerge and put all this speculation to rest for good. But until then, I want to leave you with this question to ponder. Has science truly solved the case with the delayed avalanche theory? Or is Dead Mountain keeping its darkest secrets forever? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.